Are you feeling empathy or is it emotional contagion? What's the difference? What is emotional contagion? Does it even exist? And why should it matter to you? So, I want to thank the viewers of this channel because I get great questions sometimes. And this video was born out of two different questions I got on one of my last videos. I'll read those questions to you. But I felt like this highlighted something that's super important because empathy and compassion are a key element of our relationships, right? And knowing what those are, knowing how they differ from emotional contagion, can help us be better partners, better friends, and actually have more compassion for ourselves. And then also, sometimes we're with somebody who is always talking about how empathetic they are, but we don't feel like they're empathetic at all. You know what I mean? So I think this is going to explain that for you. And another reason this is important to know about is that if you experience a lot of emotional contagion, it can actually lead to something called empathic distress. And a high degree of emotional contagion that leads to empathic distress can also be tied to high degrees of anxiety. And understanding the interrelationship of all these different words gives us concepts that we can then utilize and work on in terms of understanding ourselves and our relationships with others, and therefore our boundaries and all of those kind of things that lead to a healthier, happier life. So I'm going to read the first of the two comments. So I'm going to call this person Jay. And Jay basically writes that she felt the video was spot on, which is not what the second person said. But Jay wrote, I have someone in my life who states they are an empath. I believe they think they are empathetic because they emotionally dysregulate and think having big emotions is what empathy is. The issue is that they are only feeling their feels, not others. My therapist describes this as self-referential, and I think that's a really good term, and I'd love to hear others' perspectives on that. So I just want to say to Jay that her comment is spot on, and there is a lot of research that backs up what she's pointing to. And she's essentially describing somebody in her life who has a very high degree of emotional contagion, but not necessarily empathy. Okay, second comment. I'm going to call this person PB. So PB was a little bit critical of my video, and this video is the Am I an Empath video, which I will link at the end of this one. And I also have another one called What is an Empath that really talks a lot about what empathy is. And sometimes people do feel like the term empath is a pretty kind of woo-woo concept to quote PB, which you'll hear in a minute. But I do believe that there are people who have extremely high degrees of empathy, and that's really what I talk about in the videos. Anyway, so PB writes, you have to make sure you use language in a way that is not going to confuse or say something that you are not saying, like when you say you feel someone else's feelings, that is impossible. You might think, oh, this person is depressed, and then you feel what you think depression is, but you can't read minds and you cannot absorb other people's thoughts, feelings, or energy. You have to make sure you are not talking woo-woo. I listen to you and I ask myself if you are trying to tell people they can read minds and stuff. So
Empaths feel feelings.
I love comments, whether they are critical or not. So I'll tell you what I agree with and what I don't agree with. One, what I agree with from what PB wrote is that I should have used the term emotional contagion. When I talked in the video about feeling other people's emotions, the most commonly used term for that is emotional contagion. Where I don't agree with PB is that emotional contagion is very well scientifically proven. And the research on emotional contagion really has been done in terms of social environments, behavioral environments, and neuroscience, what's actually happening in our brain. So that's part of what I want to share with you today. So I do think that the degree to which people feel other people's emotions can vary a lot, but also our awareness of it, right? But let me first give you the definition of emotional contagion. So emotional contagion describes the phenomenon of an automatic adoption of an emotional state of another person. So, for most people watching this video, you will have a sense of emotional contagion. For example, if you go into an environment where everybody is like super excited about something, you might just totally resonate with that and pick up that emotion. Now, that doesn't mean it will happen all the time, particularly if you have sort of an overwhelming emotion going on for yourself. But very often, if we are in a group of people who are like excited and enthusiastic about something, we will feel the same. Similarly, if you go into an environment where everybody is stressed out, they're all worried about something, you might have a work environment where everybody's stressed all the time. It's really hard to be in those kind of environments and not feel stressed. So, this happens on such a natural level that we're not even always aware of it. Two researchers who are very well known in this area are Elaine Hatfield and Richard Rapson. They're actually a married couple, and they're both professors at the University of Hawaii, I believe, and they've written a number of books, and one of them is called Emotional Contagion. But they've really linked the contagiousness of emotions to how we mimic each other's expressions. So if you walk up to somebody and they've got a big smile on their face, in fact, as I smile now, you might smile, but we mimic people's facial expressions. And then because our facial expressions are part of our emotions, if we change our facial expressions, we can actually change our emotions. So a lot of the research that they've done has really linked to nonverbal communication and mimicry, mimicking postures of each other, facial expressions, movements, gestures, and that this is all done like without our really our conscious awareness, like we're not aware we're doing it. And that moment by moment, our emotional experiences are impacted by that. So basically, we sync our emotions with others. And I'm going to do a little experiment right here on screen that will help you understand this a little bit. So I have here a lemon. All right. Okay. Comment below. Ooh, now it's even hard for me to talk. Although actually, I kind of like lemon. Woo! Okay. I did need a drink of water after that. All right. So comment below. Did your face scrunch up when you saw me bite into that lemon? For many of you, I'm guessing it did, but let me know. Okay, so this next example, this one's a little bit harsher, particularly if you're a guy. But I'd like you to bring up the last time you saw a guy get hit in the groin with either a ball or by somebody or whatever. Really picture that. Or imagine you're watching it on a movie screen. Now, for many of you, particularly men, even just thinking about that will make you wince. And my guess is that if you've seen it happen in real life or when you see it happen in a movie, you actually move to protect yourself. You have an automatic reaction
My groin!
to protect that part of your body. And if it has happened to you where you have felt that pain, you will have that emotion even more strongly. Now, for women, they may also, in listening to that or watching those scenes, they might also feel it a little bit, but probably not as strong, right? So, this is actually one reason why emotional contagion and empathy based on that type of feeling is not always seen as totally compassionate because we tend to have emotional contagion more strongly with a group of people that we resonate with. So, people we think who are on the same team, so to speak, right? Not the other. So, it does not always help with empathy across different nations, different ethnic groups, people who are significantly different from you. This type of emotional contagion slash empathy doesn't always resonate, which is actually one of the problems with it. And by the way, if you're getting something out of this video, please do hit that like button. It is a huge help. And subscribe for more. And I will be linking at the end of this video my other videos on empathy. And I'll probably throw one on there about narcissism as well. So it's usually linked. Okay. But anyway, for the skeptics out there, but also those people who are interested in neuroscience, I want to share a little bit of information here with regard to the neuroscience of emotional contagion. And there is a lot of research on this. So I'm just sharing a little bit right here. So I'm actually going to read from an article that is co-authored by Tania Singer, who is one of the leading experts worldwide on empathy and compassion. She's a neuroscientist and a director at the Max Planck Institute for Human Cognitive and Brain Sciences. All right, so this is an article, and I'll show a picture of it here. Worth Googling if you want more information on this topic. But she quotes in here a multitude of neuroimaging studies using functional magnetic resonance imaging, that's the fMRI that's used for many brain imaging studies, has shown that empathizing with another person's feelings relies on the activation of neural networks that also support the first person experience of these feelings. So she talks in this article about how there are many fMRI studies that show that when somebody is empathizing with another person's feelings, the same areas in their brain light up as if they were experiencing those feelings themselves. So some research has been done with regard to pain, which is kind of interesting. But when the person themselves feels pain, there are certain areas of the brain that light up. A certain part of the anterior insula and a specific part of the anterior cingulate cortex are consistently activated when the person themselves feels the pain and when they are observing and empathizing with somebody else who is feeling that same pain. And the networks that are shared, right? Shared meaning you're experiencing something and a certain part of your brain is lighting up, and I'm watching you and empathizing with you, and that part is lighting up for me. Well, those parts vary based on what emotion you're feeling. It's fascinating, right? We are all interconnected and not in a woo-woo way. Okay, so in this article by Tania Singer, she also gives a great little chart that I'm going to show a picture of it here, where she talks about how compassion is an other related emotion. It's other focused. Whereas empathic distress is self-related. It's a self-related emotion. So when we have this emotional contagion, if our response is, "Ooh, I got to run away from here," that's empathic distress. And it actually leads us to not act in a compassionate way, but to withdraw. It's linked to non-social behavior. It's also linked to burnout and poor health. Whereas if compassion arises, compassion being a concern for the other, it's more likely to generate pro-social behaviors, approach behaviors, right? Helping behaviors. And the person themselves experiences better health and it's other focused. So in my video on Am I an Empath, I talked about feeling other people's feelings, which I should have called emotional contagion. But then I also say, if you don't also have compassion, like a true desire for the other person to be free from suffering, like a true, whether you do something about it or not, because we can't always do something about it. But unless you care, you probably don't qualify as an empath, and it probably doesn't qualify really as empathy or compassion. All right, so this video is already getting a little bit long. So let me know if you would like a video about the difference between empathy and compassion. But there's a handful of other things I would like to say on this in terms of why and how this can matter to you. Emotional contagion can be very problematic if one hasn't worked on one's boundaries in terms of what is really mine and what is really the other person, what belongs to the other person, right? In Tania Singer's article, she talks about how empathy makes it possible to resonate with other people's emotions, positive as well as negative. Right? Empathy can help us feel joy when we watch somebody else feel joy. Empathy can help us be happy when somebody else is experiencing happiness, right? So we can apply empathy on both sides, but it does seem like people who have a huge amount of empathy but pick up other people's emotions tend to really focus on the negative ones. And there's probably some innate biological reason that we do that, right? Like our negativity bias. But knowing that, how much can you increase your joy by feeling other people's joy, right? That's a way to feel happier. So that's one piece. But then she writes, importantly, in empathy, one does not confuse oneself with the other. That is, one still knows that the emotion one resonates with is the emotion of another. If this self other distinction is not present, we speak of emotional contagion, a precursor of empathy that is already present in babies. Emotional contagion without a clear boundary between self and other leads to empathic distress. And right now, given our access to events worldwide, the news focus on the negative, all sorts of things happening, if we allow emotional contagion to take over our lives, focused on all the negative stuff, we'll be miserable. We could sink into empathic distress completely, right? So being able to differentiate self from other. And in the boundary program I have that's really targeted to people with high degrees of empathy and people who consider themselves empath or might have codependency tendencies, right? We do a number of exercises and visualizations to really begin to differentiate between our own emotional realm and the other person's emotional realm. And how can we sort of feel that, pick up on it, empathize with it, but know it's not ours to take care of? Because when we get caught in that loop of not even being clear, so somebody else is in pain, emotional pain, and we take it on so much that we feel like we have to fix that emotional pain, well, we can't do that. And that's where we can get stuck in a complete cycle of anxiety. So, high degree of empathy tied with emotional contagion, tied with not really differentiating what's truly your responsibility from other people's, can lead to a lot of distress, anxiety, and unhappiness. Oh, and by the way, I do have a free boundary personality quiz. I'm going to link that below, show it here. It provides some insight as to what your boundary orientation is and why. Paying attention to when your mood shifts, why, very important stuff. All right, let me know what you think. This was a very complicated topic. I probably have like twice as much to say about it, to be honest, but I also know it can be hard to absorb information in really large chunks. So, any questions, post them. As you know, I might create a video. If you liked this, please do give it a like, subscribe to my channel. It's very helpful for me. And I truly wish all of you have an awesome day today, awesome week, and I'll see you next week.